What I just said goes to this effect, or speaks to the choice that President Tinubu had to make. He could either be, or make the choice that he will be a politician, or he will be a leader. Let me tell you the difference between the two. A politician thinks about the next election. A leader thinks about the next generation. If President Tinubu had decided or opted to be a politician, trust me, the reforms you see now, which will have the consequences naturally, will only start in his second term.
How can Gbajamiamila be saying this? He's lying on national television. He's here as the chief of staff to Tinubu, campaigning for him, and he's trying to convince Nigerians that Tinubu is implementing all these failed punishing policies because he's not thinking about 2027. What does this man take Nigerians for? He's already campaigning, someone that started campaigning even in his first year in office. Here we are, his chief of staff, instead of doing his job as the chief of staff, traveled all the way from Abuja to Abeokuta, also invited former legislators to come to Abeokuta. All the people that traveled to Abeokuta, did they just do it on their own? He still spent money to invite all of them to this summit. And here we are, he's trying to convince Nigerians that all he's doing is because of the next generation. If people are not alive today, that means there will be no new generation. There will be no next generation, yes. People need to be alive before talking about having children, before being able to afford their education, afford their health care, afford everything a family man should afford. So they can say whatever they want, but sprinkling lies here and there, thinking they are deceiving Nigerians. No, it borders on insulting the intelligence of Nigerians. How can he look us in the face and lie to us that all they are doing is for the next generation? Which next generation? There will not be a next generation because all he's implementing are failed policies from IMF and World Bank. Can they show Nigerians where these policies have ever worked? It has never worked. Also remember that Nigeria has experimented with this in the past. In the 80s, the so-called SAP, Structural Adjustment Program, implemented by IBB regime. It is the same IMF policies of devaluation of Naira and all that. The time he implemented these policies in the 80s was the first time in Nigeria's history that we witnessed a mass exodus of professionals. Yes, before the implementation of the policy, Nigerians used to travel abroad to study. When they finish their studies, they move back to Nigeria and get employed because they know they have a home. Nigeria's economy was booming at the time. They travel back to Nigeria, get employed, and start contributing to the economy, just like the Chinese, the Indians, and other foreign nationals are doing today. You see their students studying abroad, in Western universities, in the UK, in Western Europe, in the US, in Canada. But after their studies, a huge percentage of them move back to their home country because they know jobs are waiting for them there. Compare that to the first implementation of IMF policies in Nigeria by the IBB regime. Nigerians, including those traveling out to study, never came back because their money was devalued for no reason. Imagine someone that used to have 1 million naira in his bank account as savings, and all of a sudden, when Tinubu devalued the naira, that money lost value by as much as 50%. Yes, can you imagine? You worked hard in your life, saved for about 1 year or 2 years, only for someone to come to power and crash the value of the savings. That was exactly what they did. So all these failed policies have never worked anywhere in the world. Rather, these policies are used to crush the competition. Yes, how are Nigerians going to trust Tinubu, who FBI, DEA, and other foreign intelligence agencies have his criminal files? He continues to beg US courts to stop the FBI from releasing his files. So how are Nigerians supposed to trust such a man who has these criminal files? Is there any way they can prove to Nigerians that this man might not be working for foreign countries? Yes, obviously, since he's begging foreign courts to stop the release of these files, are you trying to say that he's not going to do anything that will favor them at the detriment of Nigerians just to protect that his criminal files? Yes, this is clear for everyone to understand. So Nigerians are not deceived. They can continue their campaign. They've been campaigning since they came to power. Where it becomes painful is when they start lying, telling barefaced lies. You can liken it to calling Nigerians fools. Nigerians are not fools. They can see behind all the narratives. It's just that Nigerians don't react to anything. Someone comes to power and devalues the naira, wiping off your savings, and people are not reacting to anything. Maybe it's because the number of people that have up to 500,000 naira in their savings account are actually very few in Nigeria. The last time, according to the NBS, it seems it's like less than 5% or thereabout. So majority of the masses were not directly affected. That's their savings were not hit hard by the devaluation of the naira. But everyone is suffering it today because of the high cost of living. Yes, that devaluation affected the price of goods in the market, transportation, everything. Literally, the price of goods went up by more than 200%. It depends. Some of them up to 500%. Like petrol. The price of petrol used to be less than 200 naira around the country. But today is above 800 naira. At one time, it was more than 1,000 naira. That's more than 400%. So the reality remains that all these policies they are implementing have never worked anywhere. If they can show us one country where it worked, Nigerians might say, okay, let's continue having hope that it will eventually work. But it has never worked, and there's no way it will ever work. It defies logic to crush people's savings, crash the naira, reduce the GDP and start rebuilding. It doesn't make any sense. If you are looking at achieving growth in your economy, at least if you met a GDP of about $300 billion, you have to start growing it, not crush it below $200 billion and hope to start building from below $200 billion. It doesn't make any sense. That initial crash of the GDP and the massive exodus of foreign companies from Nigeria is already proof that the policies failed. Yes, this is clear for everyone to see. These policies failed Nigeria in the 80s when IBB regime introduced it. How do they expect it to work in Nigeria of 2020s? It has never worked anywhere. These policies were introduced to the Southeast Asian countries when they started emerging in the late 80s and the 90s. All of them rejected it. Yes, especially Malaysia. They threw all the policies away. They never implemented it for 1 hour. Here we are today. How are these countries faring? They are all better than Nigeria. There is no Southeast Asian economy that is not doing better than Nigeria. That's the reality. And these are our peers. We all got independence nearly around the same time. And that time we got that independence, Nigeria was well ahead of them, including China. Nigeria still had a higher GDP in the early 80s than China that you know today. Another lie and narrative they tell Nigerians is that other countries don't pay subsidy. Do you know that the United States spends around $31 billion subsidizing oil every year? $31 billion is nearly 100% of our national budget. But they spend it every year to make sure oil price is very low for their citizens. Not trying to compare US economy to Nigeria's economy, no. But you get the picture. The only way to grow economy is to make sure the purchasing power increases. And how do you increase purchasing power? Is to make sure people have more savings. Not wake up one day and crash their savings, devalue their naira. Now, how do you expect them to contribute in growing the economy? The fastest way to grow the economy is to focus on making sure that people are able to shop. Shop till you drop. Yes, people must continue shopping. Money must continue exchanging hands. Once these stop or reduce drastically, then the economy starts to slide down. GDP starts to come down. That's how it works. You can never grow the economy with these failed IMF policies. These are punishing policies to keep Nigeria from developing, from being a future competitor to most of these countries. The IMF cannot tell the US president or the US economic managers to implement these policies they always propose to third world countries. No, they can never do that. They cannot criticize the US and tell them, why are you spending $31 billion to subsidize oil? Imagine Tinubu, who during the campaigns said that the Western countries must pay Nigeria for us to go green. But today they are trying to implement 5% tax on petrol, claiming that the 5% should go to renewable energy. Can you imagine? What has Nigeria or Africa at large contributed to the greenhouse gas emissions? We don't manufacture here. Africa is not that industrialized like Western countries or Asian countries. So our contribution is very low. Why should anyone at this time try to hold us down or prevent us from using our natural resource to at least develop? These foreign countries, they all use their natural resources, or the ones they mined in Africa or other places, they use that to develop their countries. Today, we can't even use our coal, we can't use our petrol because they've made petrol so expensive. Crude oil is found in Nigeria in large quantities. How can we pay from the nose for something that we own, something that we produce? It has never made any sense. If the government truly wants to stop paying petroleum subsidy and also, on the other hand, grow Nigeria's economy, they must make sure they find out the true quantity of petrol that is consumed in Nigeria on a daily basis. Once they find that information, they must allocate the equivalent amount of crude oil for local consumption. Once that is done, they will just recover the cost of refining the products and other sundry expenditure. If they do that, this economy will witness a sudden boom. It is necessary to understand that Nigeria's manufacturing sector cannot rely on the public power supply to manufacture their products. No, it's unreliable, and they can also not rely on expensive energy sources. It doesn't make sense. The less their overhead, the more their ability to employ more workers, the more their ability to expand production. That's the only way to grow the economy, not by implementing failed policies that only succeed in stifling manufacturing, making it very expensive to manufacture here. So who is going to employ Nigerian people? Even in Western countries, most people work for manufacturing companies. If there are no manufacturers in Nigeria, where are people going to be employed? It does not make any sense at all. So they will never implement this because they are all out to punish Nigerians. They are all out to impoverish Nigerians. The more people are impoverished, the easier for them to buy votes, the easier for them to govern the people. Yes, because imagine if majority of Nigerians are well off, they are prosperous, they don't live below the $1 per day. No one will take us for granted. As a matter of fact, these types of characters that are in power today will never emerge. You cannot deceive who are well off. You cannot deceive them with religion or ethnicity. No. Instead of facing the issues, you'll be telling the people, this one comes from here, this one is of this ethnicity, this one is of this religion. No one that is busy earning a living, living his life, living the good life will listen to that. No. And you will have fewer thugs that will disrupt the elections. No. Who will do that kind of job? Who will have time to start chasing ballot boxes around, start burning ballot boxes and beating people and assaulting people at polling units? No, no one will have time for that. It's because of the poverty that you see all this. Without that poverty, these types will not be in power. So it is still left for Nigerians to understand what they are up against. When you have people in power that are against you, people that are against the country is going nowhere with such people. So 2027 is still another opportunity for Nigerians to correct the wrongs of 2023. They must understand that these people will not give up power easily. So Nigerians must be ready for whatever it takes to take back their country from these types. Instead of focusing on doing the job or putting up an effort or even doing that campaign nearly 2 years before the election, they can continue doing that without insulting the intelligence of Nigerians. But here we are, they always brag to our faces, telling lies shamelessly, thinking that we are not smart enough to say this. Thanks for watching.